Hi, welcome to my podcast, Reclaim. I am your host, Thaís Sky. I have supported women navigate the complexities of being human for over 10 years. This podcast is where I disseminate some of those learnings and offer thoughts and guests to guide you into your healing. Welcome. Hello, beautiful humans. Thaís Sky here. Welcome to Reclaim. Welcome to Season 4 of Reclaim. Oh my goodness. I still sometimes cannot believe that we are at Season 4. My very first episode of Reclaim was October 10th, 2017. The very first episode was with my friend Lindsay Ray. The title of that episode was When Sleeping Women Wake, Mountains Move. And it was a wonderful conversation between two friends making our way through the world at that time. Now, what is today's date? It is Monday, January 18th, 2021. This episode will be released tomorrow. I wanted to record this episode as close to the release date as possible because I wanted to spend this episode just catching you all up on what's been going on in my life since the podcast went on a break. I just also wanted to share my lessons, like what I learned in 2020, what I took away from 2020, my intentions for 2021, simply as, invitations for you and opportunities for you to be reflecting on maybe some things you haven't thought of about 2020 and 2021. So season 3 went on hiatus. September? And for those of you who don't know about me or my background, I have been a life coach since 2010. 2010 was when I got my first few clients, and I started teaching yoga, and I was very much in the wellness world. And the spirituality world. I was waking up to this idea of spirituality and connectedness. I was healing from an eating disorder, from disordered eating, from binge eating, all that good stuff. And I was learning things that were really helpful for me. And I just knew that I wanted to help others. And so that's when it all kind of started for me. It was in 2010. But I didn't take my business seriously or really think that I could become an entrepreneur until 2014 when I decided I wanted to move to California and go into business full time. And so I did that June of 2015. At that time, I had shifted away from what I had been doing before of more nutrition coaching and was really working in life coaching and even a little bit of dabbling in business coaching. That was a mistake. Not that it was a mistake. It was wonderful, but it wasn't my zone of genius. And so when I moved to California, I was really now forced to have to make money in my business full time. That was obviously terrifying, but I figured it out. I did it. I created a network in Los Angeles. I was teaching workshops. My coaching business was slowly taking off. I launched a group program called Own Your Spotlight, which has been rebranded, and it now is my signature program, Worthy Women Rise. But things were slowly coming together. And then in 2018, I decided that I wanted to go back and get my master's in clinical psychology. It just felt like the work I was doing was teetering on trauma work and a type of depth work that I knew I wanted more support and knowledge around. So I went back to school and I got my master's. I graduated. I was going to say I just graduated, but actually it's been a while now that I graduated. I graduated in March of 2020. And I decided when I got my master's that I actually wanted to go for licensure and become a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California where I live. The world of psychotherapy encapsulates a few different licensures. There's licensed social worker, there's a licensed professional counselor, and there's a licensed marriage and family therapist. And those 3 licenses include slightly different umbrellas of what they cover, but they also, all three of them generally cover the same thing. So the requirements may be slightly different, but overall, the education and the knowledge is generally the same. But California, I believe, is the first state in the country to create this licensure called marriage and family therapist, which is ironic that it's called a marriage and family therapist license, because most of our practice to become licensed at this is actually done in individual therapy. We do get some couples work and some family work, but it's actually quite rare. It's more likely that in getting your marriage family therapist license, you're going to be working just with one-on-ones. So that's a weird thing. I don't know why it's called that, but I decided in grad school I actually wanted to go forward and get my licensure. And so that's the process I've been in now, where I'm still a coach. That is what I do. I make money in my coaching business. I adore my one-on-one coaching clients, and I adore the women in my group program, Worthy Women Rise. That is all still there. And then on the other hand, on the other side, I work at a mental health clinic here in Los Angeles, where I am getting my hours for licensure. And so what I'm going to do in season 4 is I'm going to do maybe, I don't know how many parts, but I'm thinking maybe a 3-part series on navigating the world of mental health, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about the different terms, the different ways that you can look at mental health, the different language. There's a lot of people who think that they're right when really they're just speaking about one theory or one perspective or one way of doing the work of mental health. So I'm going to do that. That will come. But where was I going with that? Oh, right. But in my work right now, I am getting my hours for licensure. It requires 3,000 hours, which is a lot of supervised hours. I'm about 2/3 of the way done. I will be done my hours by the end of the year. That's my goal, is to be done my hours by the end of the year so I can get licensed next year. And then how that will change my business, I don't know. But right now, there is no concern for any of my clients. Nothing is going anywhere. Even if things evolve, my clients aren't going anywhere unless they want to go. So if any of you who work with me are listening to this, do not worry. Our work is here for as long as it needs to be here. Thank God. It's not a privilege. Okay, so the reason why I wanted to share all of that with you is because I want to give you an idea of the realm in which this podcast is infused in. The podcast, My Evolution, is important because it highlights the evolution of this podcast. My work started very much in the world of spirituality and wellness, nutrition. And then that shifted away from nutrition and more deeply into spirituality. And then that evolved into now I'm really more in the world of psychology and deeply fascinated by the way in which our mind works. Okay, so there's so many different ways that you can look at psychology. But one thing, my biggest takeaway from my master's and from 2020, from my education up to this point, has been this idea of relational healing. Now, the episode before this one, episode 138 with James Olivia, we talk a little bit about relational healing, what it is, what it looks like, and I share a little bit of my story there too. But it's important to be thinking about relational healing for me, because so much of what I'm going to share on this podcast for season 4 is probably going to be anchored in this idea of relational healing. I have named that the worthiness wound is a relational wound. And I've named that because first I had conceptualized that the worthiness wound, which is an idea that I've created, that there's a sense of deep unworthiness within us. I've named that the worthiness wound. And the worthiness wound is an emotional wound, which means it comprises of an emotional experience, emotional pain, not, for example, physical pain. I call it a wound because it feels like a psychic wound. It feels like something very sensitive, very fragile, very demoralizing within ourselves, and wound just feels like it perfectly encapsulates that experience. Okay, so emotional wound means that there's a place that hasn't been emotionally processed, that's been stuck. That it feels like a great way to encapsulate the worthiness wound. Now, emotions, can you hear my dog sneezing in the background? He is too cute. Emotions are relational, which means that we have emotions that gives us information about how we are relating to the world. Now, if you're listening to this and all of this is piquing your interest, I have so many episodes about the worthiness wound. But you can also go to my website, thaissky.com, and right there on the homepage, you can download a free, I think it's like 50 or 60, some ridiculous, like really huge, comprehensive ebook that I wrote all about the worthiness wound. So you can go to the website and grab that and download that, and you'll learn more about how the worthiness wound is a relational wound. But if emotions are relational, they tell us our relationship with a thing, then the obvious next step is that the worthiness wound is relational, and that the worthiness wound was actually created as a set of relational experiences, relationships with other people, things, ideas that were harmful to our well-being. So, in order for then us to heal the worthiness wound, an important aspect of it is the quality of our relationships, is how we navigate relationships, it's how we think about relationships. I was very tempted to change the name of Reclaim for this season to Making Sense Together, because that to me is the opposite of the worthiness wound. I didn't grow up in an environment where I felt like I could talk through my problems with somebody about them. Like, I have a problem with you, so now we're going to talk it through, we're going to figure it out, and we're going to work through it. I didn't grow up in that environment. I was just told what I had to do, and my parents were my parents, and I couldn't really complain about it unless I wanted to make myself unhappy. I didn't have a space where I could just talk about my disappointments, my frustrations, and have it be heard and digested by somebody else and made sense with somebody else. So I learned I had to make sense of everything by myself. I had to figure it all out and then present it to people. If something was not good, like if I was relating to somebody, if I was in a relationship with somebody and they were doing something that bothered me, I had to make sense of it. I had to figure it out. And then I had to present to them what my conclusions were. When we talk about relational healing, or what it looks like to be in a relational environment with other people, we're actually now asking, what would it look like for us to make sense of things with other people? Not for them, not against them, but with them. That's what I want to explore with you all in season 4, in different ways. Like, what does it look like for us to deepen our relationship with ourselves and each other and the things around us? And I will be bringing guests that fit that general theme. Not every guest, of course, will have that theme, but that will be the underlying energy in which I bring. And so it may be worth for you to just be thinking about, what has been most meaningful in your life? What have you created in your life that has been the most desirous, the most delicious, the most pleasurable? Odds are those experiences were set up by relationships, or those experiences were relationships. Relationships are what gives our life so much meaning. But I wasn't always this way, and I mentioned this in the previous episode with James Olivia, that I actually didn't like people for a long time, which is weird that I'm now in the profession of helping people. But in college and before, I didn't like people, and I always felt like the outsider, and sometimes I still do. That's something that I navigate, like, what does it mean to belong? I was distrustful of people, and I just had this understanding that people are the problem, like everything is fine in my own world, and then people come into my world and they disrupt my world. And the best way that then I know how to make sense of it is to retreat and withdraw and go back into my world. That has been with me for a very long time. And now I'm thinking, I wonder if so many of us who consider that introversion, right, the sense of like we restore alone, what if that wasn't introversion, but rather a lack of safety in being able to properly restore and connect within relationships with other people? Not saying that introversion isn't a thing. No, that's not what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that introversion is a bad thing. Again, not saying any judgments about introversion. I don't, I'm not making any comments about introversion. I just am speaking from my own experience. I wonder how many times I thought, oh, I'm just introverted, and that's why I need so much space from other people. When really what I was saying was, I don't know how to really be myself around other people because I've learned how to wear masks around other people and how to orient myself around their pleasure and opinion. And that has been so exhausting to me that the only way I knew how to then fill my empty vessel, fill myself, is by being alone. And what may then be different if I didn't feel the need to have to manage other people's opinions and perspectives, and I didn't have to be so focused on other people's perspectives, and ideas? Would then I be less likely to need so much space alone? Right? Like, that's interesting. And I think that is a really big lesson that I learned in 2020 going into 2021 is I was not taught how to be in relationship, like thriving relationship with other humans. I claim in my healing that my mother, I would name her as a narcissist, and I would name her attempts to relate to me as a narcissistic extension, which means I am an extension of her, and my value lies in how I am able to uphold her narcissism. And I really, y'all, I don't like to use the word narcissism because it's so overused in our culture right now. But yeah, it just fits with her, which is really quite painful. But it just is, I think, who she is. And I'm not diagnosing her with a personality disorder, but I'm just kind of saying that, yeah, I think she is. And so being a narcissistic extension, I highly recommend the book, The Drama of the Gifted Child, if this resonates with any of you. If this feels like, yeah, I think my mother may be this way too, I highly, highly recommend that book. I learned that my presence was really built to be in service of others. And untangling from that has meant learning how to relate to others differently. And that's hard. And it requires a lot of emotional risks, and it requires really standing in your truth. And I want to disseminate some of what I've been learning in that to you all. And that's what you can expect from me, both on my Instagram, which you can follow me at I am Thaís Guy, but also here on the podcast. Let's have more conversations about this. And if you have any specific questions about this, don't hesitate to email me at info@thaisguy.com, and I'll be taking those emails and maybe creating some podcast episodes around those. So if you're thinking about this and you're like, oh, I think I have a question that may be helpful to hear Thais's perspective on it, don't hesitate to email me at info@thaisguy.com. Okay. Okay, so what else do I want to share? Okay, so lessons from 2020, that I think we are much more relational than we give ourselves credit to being, and a relationship is actually what heals more so than any type of self-healing. Listen, I think that there's a space and a place for self-healing or healing self. I grew up on self-healing in that my mother, I grew up with self-development books. I grew up with yoga. I grew up with meditation. I knew how to meditate when I was 8 years old. I have more self-development books than I care to share. And all these self-development is self-healing, right? To develop the self. And most of those books happen in a silo of just you reading them and you journaling and you yourself pulling yourself out of your pain. And I think that those have a lot of value, and I'm obviously going to write a book someday. So I'm not saying that no books have value. Please buy my book. um, but I think so much of what we have seen in 2020 is that the world will collapse if we don't think about how we are in relationship to each other. Right? I mean, the pandemic really took away, for many of us, a normal way of relating and being in the world, where we could go to eat in a restaurant and we can hug people. And wherever you are in the world, you probably had to navigate some of that, even if maybe not to the extent that the United States has had to navigate that. Some countries have done a much better job of containing the virus than we have. But no matter how the pandemic has affected you, it definitely forced us to really question how much being together in close quarters can affect another human. And like, now that we're still in this pandemic, I'm just like, are we ever going to return to a world where it's acceptable to go into a public place and sneeze openly? Like, doesn't that just gross you out a little bit? Because it really grosses me out how much before COVID that we thought it's completely acceptable, normal to go to work sick and to cough and sneeze everywhere. Now, listen, not every workplace has the type of policy to stay at home. Obviously, a lot of us don't want to go to work sick, but we can't take the time off or whatever. I get that. But I'm just saying, like, how often did we then get sick and go out to eat at a restaurant and like not even think about the fact that we may run the risk of infecting someone with our cold? Like, so little of that. I think the pandemic is really inviting us to consider just how interconnected we are, just how dependent we are on each other. And that if we can put down our stuff long enough, we can actually save each other. At this point of recording, we have, I think, had 400,000 deaths in the United States, which when they estimated that we would have maybe 200,000 deaths, that felt like such a overestimate, and now we're at double of that, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. It just makes me so sad thinking about how much of this could have been saved if we were just a little bit more thoughtful about how we relate to each other. But we don't often think about relating to each other in this way, because in order to be in relationship with another, we have to learn how to get out of our own mind and be in the reality of the other human. And oftentimes we're so caught up in the reality that we have made in our minds. Like, we have make up stories about what's happening. We make up ideas and assumptions about what the other person is saying. And then we react from those assumptions instead of asking and being with the reality of the intersubjectiveness of this middle space between the other person and us. Climate change is another great example of like, wow, we need to really rally our resources, and we need to do this quickly. We need to change really big things really fast. And we're not, our culture at large is really struggling to know how to do that, when it means having to really think about other people, when so much of leadership is about power. So community care, I think, has been even more important in 2020, and I think it will continue to be important in 2021, though I am not a prophet. I don't know what the fuck is going to happen this year. But I'm hopeful that we can continue to keep in mind that we coexist and that our part matters, and playing our part matters. Okay, so what else has happened since the break? So since the podcast ended, September of 2020, I started at a new mental health clinic, and this new mental health clinic is also a training center. It's also a training facility. So I am in school again. Basically, I have 6 to 8 hours of school of classes a week, and then I see my patients, and then I have supervision, and then I have my own coaching work. So it's been quite an adjustment. And I think that that will mean that I need to be a little bit more flexible and patient with myself around the consistency that I would like this podcast to be out in the world for season 4. I already grappled with that in season 3. There were times when I really struggled with maintaining a weekly podcast schedule. And as much as I am a perfectionist and would love to commit to a weekly podcast schedule for season 4, I'm trying to be really gentle with myself that just may not happen because of my limited availability. And so that's just the nature of the beast. I think that's just the way things are going to have to be for now. And the other big news that happened since the podcast got paused for between season 3 or 4 is I got engaged. It's really exciting. Yay, I got engaged. What should I say about it? It was wonderful. It happened in Sedona, which is a very magical place. It was very thoughtful and very kind, and I'm very excited to marry this human. And I'm going to actually do a whole episode on what I have been reflecting on as someone, like in the engaged process. There's a lot of questions and things that I've been thinking about as an identity. Identity has changed in many ways. My relationship feels different in many ways. And I want to talk about all those things. So that will come in the future of season 4. And I think that's it in terms of like the big what's been going on in Thaís Guy's world. I'm really, really looking forward to continuing to connect with all of you in 2021. Right now, the way I'm envisioning my business is I want to continue to Run Worthy Women Rise as a year-long program, but I want to offer something more short-term for people who want to get access to my work and not yet feel ready to commit to a year-long experience with me. So I'm trying to figure out how I want to do that. That will be part of my 2021. I also still continue to have my mentorship for coaches who like to go deep. That will continue to be a part of my 2021. And then, of course, my one-on-one coaching, which I very rarely have openings and availabilities. And so if you're interested in doing one-on-one coaching with me, you can go to my website, thaisguy.com/coaching, and get on my wait list. I tap into the wait list maybe once or twice a year. My schedule is very full. So that's just that. And let me think, there's anything else that I want to share with you before I wrap things up. Here's the thing, right? 2020 took a lot from us. It took a lot from us. It took a lot of hopes and dreams and desires. It took jobs. It took health. It took our access to family, access to friends. It took so much, and we adjusted. We figured it out. And I think that really speaks to the nature, the human nature experience of being able to figure things out. It's always when I go through something really hard and I get to the other side and I'm like, wow, I was terrified of what was going to happen. I got through the other side and now I feel like I'm stronger for it and better for it. I think that is what the best that we can hope for, is that shitty things are going to happen to us, but we can figure it out. We can move through it. We can navigate it. We can overcome. We are so much stronger, so much more resilient, so much more capable than we think we are. And we have the capacity to do the hard things and to navigate hard things. And it may destroy and it may hurt and it may suck. Shitty things happen. It's just kind of the nature, I think, of being alive. Shitty things are inevitably going to happen, whether or not you manifest it. It's not about manifesting. It just kind of is. But I'm also just continually amazed at our ability to move through things. And so I'm saying this to you because I want to end this episode reminding you that you are much more capable than you think you are. I promise you, you can get through the thing, whatever that thing is, the conversation that you still haven't had, that you've been wanting to have, or the decision that's been on the back of your mind and you're like, I don't know if I'm ready to make this decision yet. Whatever it is, I believe in you, and I know that there's people in your life that believe in you too. You got this. Do it scared, like, but do it. Do that thing. Our life is not guaranteed. Things can change very quickly. If we didn't learn that in 2020, I don't know what more it will take for us to learn that. Democracy in the United States have been threatened. I mean, it's just like so much has happened and we've gone through it, and things tend to work out. And it sucks and it hurts and it's painful, but things get moved through. So show up for it. Show up for your life. Show up for the excitement. Say yes to doing what needs to be done, to the growth, to the work, to the conversations. Like, sit at the table and get ready, because your life has beautiful things for you all around you, just waiting for you to notice it, for you to slow down, to pay attention, to love it, to say yes to it. I love all of you tremendously. Welcome to season 4, my friends. I'm so looking forward to continuing to share with you missives and thoughts and ideas about how to navigate this messy world. I'm honored to be here with you all. Please leave a review if the podcast has meant anything to you. It really does make a difference. Sending you my love, and I will see you soon.